too, if you will. Oh, okay, we're going to do it the other way around. Stay up here. I'll talk to you this way. So have a seat if you'd like. So a few of you, but probably none of you, remember me. My name is Mother Carola, or Carola, and I was the priest here. I was just like Father Brian there for about 2 years before he came here. And so this is my church family. Hi, church family. And you remember me. I'm so glad. You're old enough to remember me. I left here about 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
7 years ago. Anyway, I work for a place called Food for the Poor. And what do you think we worry about in the world if we're food for the poor? Yes. Sure. Anyway. Food, is that what I heard? And starvation. What smart children you have here. Amazing. Well, we do. We have.
Because we have our food pantry, but I don't know.
Yeah. And we work with people who are really poor and really hungry. So, how many of you had breakfast today? Astonishing. What good families you have that fed you. Yeah.
I was at a sleepover, so.
Well, we know you had food, because there's always food at sleepovers. And I would ask, how many of you think you're going to get lunch today? Most of you. Dinner? And how many of you are so hungry right now that you want to say, I just can hardly wait for lunch? Yeah. Well, I work in countries where kids like you don't get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They don't even always get breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I'm going to tell you kind of a sad story, okay? And the sad story is that we went to a country called Haiti, where there are a lot of really hungry people. And we went in the home of a family, and there were 2 boys in that home. And one of them was sitting at a table, and he had a bowl with some rice in it and a couple of little bits of other things. And he was eating his food, and it was his only meal he was going to get that day. And he was eating it, and he was so happy. And then his brother was standing kind of not eating, standing away from the table, looking kind of hungrily at the food there. And a man asked him, so why aren't you sitting and eating with your brother? And his answer was, because today is not my turn to eat. I'm going to get to eat tomorrow, and then he won't get to eat. Can you imagine? Yeah, you're making the same faces that I would make. Oh, no. So what do you think we could do so that both of those boys could eat? Yeah, just shout it out.
You could raise money. You could split the portions.
Split the portions. Wow, why didn't I think of that? I never thought of doing that. And we could send them money, couldn't we? What else could we do? Donate? Donate for a food drive. You do that here, don't you? And you feed lots of hungry people. Yay. What else could we do for them? I have one idea. We could pray for them too, couldn't we? So I'm going to ask all of you to, the next time you sit down to a yummy meal that your family makes for you, that you pray for the people who don't have food. Okay? Thank you. You get to go back. You get to do that too. Okay? You can pray the next time you get a yummy meal. And you can split portions, eating half as much. What an interesting idea. But there are so many ways to help. Well, I am delighted to be here. I'm thankful for the kids who came forward and were brave. And I'm glad to be here because you're my home parish. I work with Food for the Poor because of you all. And I just love to be here and be with you. So thank you. I want to start today by taking off my mask. And I'm going to tell you about what's happening with Food for the Poor and how you can help and donate and feed and do all those good things. But I want to start with today's gospel because it's a wonderful gospel story that we shouldn't miss. Today's gospel is in the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus is with his disciples, and he asks a really important question. It might be the most important question in the Bible. He asks this question, who do people say that I am? And they have all sorts of good ideas. Well, some people say you're Elijah, and some say you're John the Baptist, and some think you're this, that, and the other thing. And Jesus says, but who do you say I am? He gets specific. And Peter answers, you are the Messiah. You are the Christ. It's a question that is asked not just of Peter, but is asked of each one of us to be able to say, who is this Jesus? Why? What? When? Where? But who is Jesus? Peter answers the question correctly, wonderfully, and Jesus says, well done. You get it. And then he goes on to say, yes, I am the Christ, I am the Messiah, and I am now turning towards Jerusalem and turning towards suffering and death. It is this crux of his ministry time, this moment where he goes from teaching and feeding and healing and doing all those good things to the ultimate sacrifice for us and for our salvation of going to Jerusalem. And Peter, who has just gotten the high five from Jesus for answering the question right, pipes up and says, oh no, don't do that. Whatever you do, don't suffer. Don't die. Don't go to Jerusalem. No, we need you doing this part of your ministry, not that. And I think it's the most human response and a really important response. I had a seminary professor who said the whole gospel is in these verses. This is such an important moment of who do you say I am, but also what is the work of Jesus and what is our work. And Jesus goes, you don't get it, Peter, and says these words that I hope never to hear. Get thee behind me, Satan. And he then explains what his ministry is about. I saw some of you nod when I said, I think that response of, no, don't go into suffering, is such a human and common response. We don't want to see anyone else suffer, and we sure don't want to see ourselves suffer. We, in our society, in our lives, will do almost anything to avoid suffering, including addictions and possessions and television, and you name it, to avoid that time of having to be hungry or having to deal with pain and loss or having to do some of the work that we really need to do. and to do that in the community, to enter into suffering. And yet that's the call that we have as Christians, to enter into that suffering as well. That doesn't mean not to rejoice and have joy and celebrate, but also as a community to enter into that. I love being back at Advent. This morning, I got a tour of your food pantry. Wow! Did you hear that? Wow. Get a tour if you haven't had one. You all are doing amazing things through your food pantry, through the feeding at schools, through the body and soul ministry, through Room at the Inn, and many other ways in caring for your community and caring for one another. And I am super impressed and proud of you, in case you're wondering. And I'm also thankful for you because we've been coming here to Church of the Advent for 20-some years. And this is my third trip here with Food for the Poor. And you all are gracious and generous to the work of Food for the Poor in the places we serve. And I'm thankful for that. So I'm going to tell you about Food for the Poor now, but I'm going to get a brochure first. Ha. And I'm going to ask you all to pull these out of your bulletins. And if you didn't get one of these brochures, there are about 100 more of them in the back of the church, and you can pick one out on your way out. How many of you don't have a clue who I am and have never heard about Food for the Poor? Oh, okay, good. There's about 5 of them back in that corner. I'm going to remind you about Food for the Poor anyway. We're a relief and development organization that helps in 17 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. And we're one of the largest in the U.S. working internationally. And we help with about $1 billion a year of aid in those countries. And not all of that comes from my pocket or your pocket, but a lot of it does. And others comes from countries donating rice to us, or people donating products, or medical supplies, or hospital equipment, or school equipment, and things like that. And we can take these things to these countries and help them. Relief work is basically giving people fish. We feed almost 2 million people a day at schools, hospitals, at feeding centers, church distribution centers, various ways of feeding people. And it's needed. People are truly starving, as our young people told us this morning, that we're worried about starvation. Development work goes beyond food and water and goes to issues of teaching people how to fish. Literally how to fish. We have a Teach Them How to Fish program at Food for the Poor, but also how to do different work that will sustain them. And we really want to focus on sustainable development so that when we have taught a village how to fish, or a group of 10-year-olds how to be welders, that they can go out and work and weld and fish and sew and bake and do the things so that they can make their own way and help others. I'm going to tell you my current favorite story. I was in Guatemala on a mission trip just before the pandemic broke out. And on this trip, we were in this village way high up in the mountains, and it took, if someone on a farm were hurt with equipment or a sickle or whatever, It took a 3-hour walk to get to the closest medical help. The school there was minimal, and the village suffered from hunger and vagaries of weather and everything else. But we were taken, the other speakers and I, were taken in this village to the home of a woman who was very organized and very smart. And Food for the Poor had found her through one of our partnering agents. And we went to her and said, Maria, we want you to become a pig farmer. And Maria said, okay. And so she received from Food for the Poor, from donors to Food for the Poor, 2 piglets. Squirmy, wiggly, slimy little guys. Corkscrew tails. And she received a bag of pig food and instruction on how to raise piglets, which is pretty easy. Feed them, they grow. And the 2 piglets, guess what they did? They became pigs very quickly. It's surprising how fast this to this happens. And she was able to take them to market and sell these 2 pigs. And with the money she got for the 2 pigs, she added on to her little kitchen in her little house. And she bought 2 more piglets. And guess what happened to those piglets? They became pigs. And she kept doing this. And eventually she said, I'm paying money for someone to make bacon out of those pigs. I think I'll make my own bacon. And so she learned to slaughter the pigs and how to make bacon. And she made more money. She will never be a Bill Gates. Her annual salary runs about $1,000 a year. But before that, she was earning maybe $1 a day on a very good day, sometimes $1 a week. So her life was hugely changed. We're in the business not just of handing things out, but of transformation and hope. And this is what happened to this woman. But my favorite part of the story is not just the 2 little squeaky, slimy piglets becoming pigs. But do you know what Maria does now? She trains other pig farmers. She is the person who brings the squealy guys to a new farmer with the bag of food and gives training on how to do this. She pays it forward. And that initial investment was $100. And now they're in that village. They have better schooling and better medical care and way more hope because of what we do to bring that and to pass that forward. And that's what we get to contribute to. Your bulletins have 2 parts to them, your inserts. And one part is you kind of rip them apart carefully, like this. And one part is a poster with why we do what we do, which is Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. Jesus said, as much as you do this for the least of my children, you do it as unto me. That's really good news. We get to do the works of Jesus for Jesus. And there's also ways that we can help. And some pictures of where there has been help. I suggest that you take this home and post it on your fridge and pray for the work of Food for the Poor and the people who are so in need of this. The other half is an envelope, which I ask that you fill out and make a generous contribution to the work of Food for the Poor. Our needs are always high. You can give the envelope back to me after the service or at coffee minutes. You can give it to Brian. You can make a check out to Food for the Poor, or you can make it out to Advent with a memo line that says for Food for the Poor. You can do many things. You can use your smartphones and text a donation in, but I don't know how to do that. And I ask that you use these envelopes because there's a gift number there that means Advent sent it, someone from Advent. One of the reasons that this is so vital right now is you've heard in the news and seen images of what's going on in Haiti, right? Well, let me tell you a little bit, flesh that out. In Haiti, right, starting in late June, a new crisis hit Haiti. And it had three parts. One was simple starvation. 4 million out of the 11 million people in Haiti are in danger of starving to death in the next year. And 2 million of those are children. And we can stop that. We can help that. The second thing that is going on there is that COVID, which was almost non-existent for the first year, is rampant in Haiti, and there are no vaccines. Food for the Poor has helped with that. They went to the Southern Command in Florida, and they airlifted 11 freezers to Haiti so that they can freeze the vaccine, and people are now able slowly to get the vaccine. And the third thing is a political unrest that we've never seen before, worse than all the other political unrests that have been in Haiti. The government there is so unstable that they have imported gangs to come and do genocide, to kill the Haitians. It's not understandable, but it is happening. And those gangs are also stopping goods from getting to where they need to go. And those gangs are causing more fear and unrest. I was in a meeting with the head of our Haitian office, who's Bishop Auger Beauvoir. He's an Episcopal bishop. And as he was telling us what was going on, we heard gunfire everywhere around him. And he peeked out his window and said, "Oh, they're shooting all over my front yard." He often cannot leave his house, nor can the workers leave their house to do the feeding. And we're working on that. We have gotten supplies to where they need to go, especially since the earthquake. But all of us can participate in that. If you make a gift today to Haiti specifically, not to Haiti, to Food for the Poor with Haiti on it, that will go for work that needs doing. Since the earthquake some weeks ago, now there will be work of rebuilding homes and schools and hospitals and community centers. And we get to participate in that work. So once again, I am here with outstretched hand and with outstretched hand of gratefulness to you, the good people of Advent. Amen. I have one more thing to say. And that is, for those of you at home, you can send money to the church office and designate that it's to go to Food for the Poor. Thank you.